Hello, welcome to another psychology lecture to help you rest. Tonight, we will talk about the fascinating and often perplexing phenomenon known as déjà vu, exploring its psychological and neurological underpinnings, and positioning it within a broader spectrum of similar experiential anomalies. We will delve into the very fabric of memory, perception, and consciousness to unravel what this common yet mysterious experience truly tells us about the workings of our own minds. If you would like, subscribe or comment to support this channel and its mission to bring accessible, in-depth psychological knowledge to everyone. Now, please lie back, close your eyes if you are comfortable, and allow your mind to settle into the rhythm of this lecture. Let the quiet hum of the information wash over you, providing a soothing backdrop to your thoughts as you prepare for a peaceful night. Tonight, we begin our exploration into the intriguing world of subjective experience, focusing on one of its most widely reported, yet still enigmatic, manifestations: déjà vu. The very phrase itself, originating from the French meaning already seen, perfectly captures the essence of this peculiar feeling. It is that uncanny sensation of having already experienced a current situation, witnessed a particular scene, or participated in a specific conversation, despite knowing, intellectually and logically, that this is the first time it has ever happened. This dual awareness, the potent feeling of familiarity conflicting with the rational understanding of novelty, is what makes déjà vu so uniquely puzzling, and for many, so compelling. It is a moment when our internal sense of reality seems to fracture, just for a fleeting second, leaving us with a profound sense of disorientation, or perhaps a strange sense of wonder. To truly understand déjà vu, we must first embark on a journey of precise definition and careful differentiation. It is crucial to distinguish déjà vu from other related but distinct mental phenomena. For instance, déjà vu is emphatically not precognition. It does not involve any genuine foreknowledge of future events, nor does it imply a supernatural ability to predict what is to come. While the experience might feel as though one has witnessed the future, it is entirely a product of the present moment, a misattribution of familiarity within the confines of our immediate perception and memory. Similarly, déjà vu is not a fantasy or a product of an overactive imagination in the typical sense. It is not a deliberate creation of the mind, but rather an unbidden, spontaneous occurrence, a sudden glitch in our cognitive processing that intrudes upon our conscious awareness. Nor is it simply a vague recollection, an instance of remembering something that genuinely happened in the past. When we experience déjà vu, there is a distinct, often unsettling awareness that the familiarity we are feeling cannot be rationally explained by a previous identifiable event. It is a feeling of false recognition, a cognitive illusion where the sense of having seen or done something before is profoundly strong, yet simultaneously understood to be erroneous. This intrinsic contradiction is at the heart of the déjà vu experience, setting it apart from genuine memory retrieval. The term déjà vu itself, now a common part of everyday lexicon across many languages, was first coined in the late 19th century by the French psychic researcher and philosopher Émile Boirac. Boirac, born in 1851, was a professor of philosophy at the University of Grenoble and later served as its rector. He was deeply interested in parapsychology and phenomena of the mind, and his work sought to categorize and understand these often inexplicable experiences. It was in his 1910 book L'avenir des sciences psychiques, or The Future of Psychic Sciences, that he formally introduced the term, although he had been discussing and collecting instances of the phenomenon for some time prior. Boirac used déjà vu to describe the subjective experience of a sudden, vivid sense of having seen something before, a term that succinctly captured the feeling of prior experience without necessarily implying a true, factual memory. His contribution was pivotal, as it provided a concrete label for an experience that many had undoubtedly felt, but lacked a clear linguistic means to describe or discuss. Prior to Boirac, such experiences might have been vaguely referred to as false memory, paramnesia, or simply dismissed as odd momentary delusions. By giving it a name, Boirac opened the door for systematic study and classification within the burgeoning field of psychology. Early psychoanalytic and philosophical interpretations of déjà vu often delved into its potential deeper, more symbolic meanings. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, explored déjà vu as a manifestation of repressed unconscious desires or fantasies. In his view, the sensation of déjà vu might arise when an individual encounters a situation that unconsciously aligns with a repressed wish or a childhood memory. The mind, unable to consciously acknowledge the repressed material, misinterprets the resulting familiarity as a previous concrete experience. For example, a new situation might unconsciously trigger a memory of a forbidden desire or a fantasy, leading to the bizarre sense of having already seen or already done it. Carl Jung, another titan of analytical psychology, offered a more spiritual or archetypal interpretation. He suggested that déjà vu could be linked to the collective unconscious, a universal, inherited repository of human experiences and archetypes. For Jung, déjà vu might be a momentary connection to these deep, innate patterns, a glimpse into a primordial memory shared by all humanity or even a past life experience, though this latter concept is less commonly accepted within mainstream psychology today. These early theories, while less empirically verifiable by modern scientific standards, highlighted the profound impact of déjà vu on the human psyche and its potential to hint at deeper psychological processes. They underscored the idea that our conscious experience is often influenced by layers of the unconscious, shaping our perception of reality in subtle yet powerful ways. Philosophers, too, pondered déjà vu as a challenge to our understanding of time, memory, and the nature of reality itself, questioning whether our subjective experience could truly be trusted as a reliable guide to truth. Moving beyond these historical and conceptual frameworks, let us now focus on the phenomenology of the déjà vu experience itself, what it feels like in the moment. The most salient characteristic is an intense, yet typically fleeting feeling of familiarity. It is not merely a vague sense of recognition, but often a profound and vivid sensation that can momentarily stop us in our tracks. This familiarity can apply to a visual scene, a conversation, a particular sound, or even an entire situation. One might be walking down a street never before visited and suddenly feel an overwhelming certainty that they have walked that exact path, seen those exact buildings, felt that exact breeze. Or one might be engaged in a conversation, hearing a particular phrase or observing a specific gesture, and experience a powerful conviction that they have heard those exact words, seen that exact movement, in the same context before. However, crucially, this intense familiarity is almost always accompanied by a simultaneous awareness that this familiarity is fundamentally misplaced. This is often referred to as the conflict of signals. Our brain is receiving a powerful signal of, "I know this," yet our rational, conscious mind simultaneously asserts, "I absolutely do not know this. This is new." This internal contradiction is what makes déjà vu so disorienting and memorable. It is not just feeling familiar with something old. It is feeling familiar with something new in a way that feels fundamentally wrong, creating a cognitive dissonance. This intellectual realization that the experience is novel, despite the strong feeling of prior acquaintance, is a defining feature. Without this counter-signal of novelty, the experience would simply be one of genuine recall, not déjà vu. The emotional tone of déjà vu is also an interesting aspect. For most healthy individuals, déjà vu is often described as neutral, mildly intriguing, or slightly unsettling. It can evoke a momentary sense of wonder, a brief intellectual puzzle, or a slight feeling of confusion or weirdness. It is rarely associated with intense fear, anxiety, or distress in the general population. In fact, for many, it can even be a somewhat pleasant or fascinating anomaly, a fleeting moment of intrigue. However, it is important to note that in clinical contexts, particularly for individuals experiencing temporal lobe epilepsy, déjà vu can be a prolonged, distressing, and even frightening symptom, often preceding a seizure. But for the vast majority of people who experience it occasionally, it is a benign, brief, and often forgotten occurrence, leaving behind only a faint memory of an odd sensation. The prevalence of déjà vu is surprisingly high. Research suggests that between 60 and 80% of individuals in the general population report having experienced déjà vu at some point in their lives. This makes it one of the most common and widely reported experiential anomalies. Interestingly, its prevalence is not uniform across all age groups. Déjà vu appears to peak in adolescence and young adulthood, typically between the ages of 15 and 25. During these formative years, individuals are often exposed to a vast array of new environments, experiences, and social interactions. Their brains are still developing, and their cognitive systems are highly active and flexible, constantly processing novel information and forming new connections. This period of intense learning and neurodevelopment may contribute to the higher frequency of déjà vu experiences, as the brain's processing systems are particularly dynamic and perhaps more prone to momentary glitches or misattributions of familiarity. As individuals age, there is a gradual decline in the reported frequency of déjà vu. This decline continues into middle and older adulthood. There are several potential reasons for this observed pattern. One theory suggests that with age, our brains become more efficient at processing information and consolidating memories. The neural pathways become more established and less prone to the kind of subtle synchronization errors or perceptual ambiguities that might trigger déjà vu in younger, more actively developing brains. Additionally, older adults have accumulated a vast reservoir of genuine memories and experiences, meaning that truly novel situations become less frequent, and the cognitive system may be less surprised by new input. Furthermore, some cognitive functions, such as episodic memory recall and processing speed, may show a natural decline with age, which could also influence the nature and frequency of these subjective experiential anomalies. The shift from a peak in youth to a decline in later life underscores the idea that déjà vu is likely tied to the dynamic processes of memory formation, perception, and attention, rather than being a static or unchanging feature of human consciousness. To broaden our scope beyond just déjà vu, it is essential to understand that it is not an isolated phenomenon, but rather one of a spectrum of fascinating glitches in our subjective experience of reality. Psychologists often group these related phenomena under the broader umbrella term les fausses reconnaissances, or false recognitions. These are instances where our brain's recognition system, whether of people, places, objects, or ideas, produces a subjective feeling that does not align with objective reality or verifiable memory. By examining these other false recognitions, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complex and sometimes fallible nature of our cognitive processes and how our brains construct our perception of the world. Let us delve into some of these prominent relatives of déjà vu, starting with its direct opposite, jamais vu. From the French, meaning never seen, jamais vu is the uncanny experience of something familiar suddenly feeling alien, new, or foreign. Imagine looking at your own hand, a part of your body you have seen countless times, and for a fleeting moment, it feels completely unfamiliar, as if you are seeing it for the very first time, divorced from any personal context or recognition. Or perhaps you are repeating a common word aloud, like tree or book, and suddenly the word loses all meaning, sounding utterly bizarre and nonsensical, despite your perfect understanding of its definition just moments before. This is the essence of jamais vu. It is a temporary breakdown in the automatic recognition of something that is demonstrably and undeniably familiar. Unlike déjà vu, which presents novelty as familiarity, jamais vu presents familiarity as novelty. It highlights a momentary disruption in the brain's ability to access or associate stored knowledge with a currently perceived stimulus. While less common than déjà vu, jamais vu is often reported by individuals experiencing fatigue, stress, or certain neurological conditions such as epilepsy. It reminds us that our sense of familiarity is not a given. It is a continuously generated state, vulnerable to transient disruptions in our cognitive machinery. The profound strangeness it evokes can be more unsettling than déjà vu precisely because it challenges the very foundation of our stable, familiar world. Next, we have presque vu, a phenomenon so common it has its own widely recognized idiom, the tip of the tongue phenomenon. From the French, meaning almost seen or almost known, presque vu is the frustrating experience of knowing that you know something, feeling that the information is just on the verge of conscious recall, yet being unable to articulate or fully retrieve it. You might be trying to remember the name of an actor, a particular word, or a specific fact, and you feel an intense certainty that the information is stored in your memory, perhaps even recalling its first letter or the number of syllables. But the complete recall remains stubbornly out of reach. This is a common and often irritating cognitive glitch. Unlike déjà vu or jamais vu, which deal with the feeling of familiarity or novelty regarding a current experience, presque vu is primarily a failure of memory retrieval, specifically, a failure to fully access semantic memory, our storehouse of facts and general knowledge. It demonstrates that memory retrieval is not an all-or-nothing process. Sometimes, the brain can partially activate a memory, producing a strong feeling of knowing and proximity to the information, without completing the full retrieval process. This phenomenon is a powerful illustration of the distinction between having information stored in memory and being able to consciously access it. The feeling of knowing, without full recall, highlights the metacognitive aspect of memory, our awareness of our own knowledge states. Beyond these more common cousins, there are other, more specific forms of false recognition that further illustrate the diverse ways our brains can misattribute familiarity. One such example is déjà entendu, which translates from French as already heard. As the name suggests, déjà entendu is the feeling of having heard something before, specifically an auditory stimulus, when in reality it is new. This can apply to a piece of music, a particular phrase, a sound, or even an entire conversation. The sensation is similar to déjà vu, but strictly limited to the auditory domain. Imagine hearing a melody for the first time, yet feeling an intense conviction that you have heard it countless times before, perhaps in a dream or a long-forgotten moment. This phenomenon underscores that the feeling of familiarity can be modality-specific, affecting our auditory processing independently or in conjunction with other sensory inputs. It points to the intricate neural networks dedicated to processing and recognizing sound, and how even these highly specialized systems can, on occasion, produce a transient error in recognition. Another fascinating, albeit rarer variant is déjà visité, or already visited. This describes the uncanny sensation of having an intimate familiarity with a place you have never physically been to. This is distinct from simply recognizing a landmark from a photograph or a film. Déjà visité involves a deep, visceral sense of knowing the layout, the atmosphere, or even specific details of a location that you are genuinely encountering for the first time. One might walk into a city or a building in a foreign land and feel an inexplicable certainty about its hidden corners, its historical significance, or its specific ambiance, as if they have explored it extensively in a previous life or a vivid dream. While less common than déjà vu, déjà visité is particularly intriguing because it challenges our understanding of spatial memory and navigation. It suggests that our brains might sometimes construct or activate a spatial schema that strongly aligns with a new environment, leading to a powerful, albeit false, sense of prior experience. Some theories suggest it could be linked to indirect exposure, such as extensive reading about a place, or perhaps even a more generalized sense of archetypal recognition that evokes a powerful, if unfounded, sense of prior experience. The purpose of exploring these diverse forms of false recognition, déjà vu, jamais vu, presque vu, déjà entendu, and déjà visité, is to establish a clear shared vocabulary for discussing these intriguing phenomena, and more importantly, to frame déjà vu not as a singular isolated mystery, but as one of a spectrum of fascinating glitches in our subjective experience of reality. By understanding that our minds can misattribute familiarity, experience novelty as foreign, or struggle with memory retrieval in various ways, we begin to appreciate the inherent complexity and occasional fallibility of our cognitive systems. These experiences are not signs of mental illness or supernatural intervention for the vast majority of people. Instead, they are momentary windows into the intricate, dynamic, and sometimes imperfect processes by which our brains construct our subjective reality. They highlight the incredible feat our brains perform continuously, creating a seamless, coherent, and consistent sense of self and world, even as it sometimes generates these peculiar and fleeting anomalies. By studying these glitches, psychologists gain valuable insights into the underlying mechanisms of perception, attention, memory, and consciousness. They reveal that our conscious experience is not a perfect, objective mirror of reality, but rather a sophisticated, constantly updated, and occasionally flawed interpretation generated by our complex neural machinery. This foundational understanding sets the stage for our deeper dive into the neurological and psychological theories that attempt to explain why these fascinating experiences occur. We will move from defining the phenomena to exploring the brain structures and cognitive processes that give rise to them, demonstrating that even the most mysterious, subjective sensations can often be traced back to the intricate workings of our biological selves. This systematic approach allows us to demystify déjà vu and its relatives, transforming them from inexplicable mysteries into compelling subjects of scientific inquiry. Let us now reflect for a moment on the vastness of the internal world that each of us carries, a world constructed from billions of neurons firing in intricate patterns, shaping our every thought, feeling, and perception. It is within this incredibly complex and dynamic system that experiences like déjà vu arise. These are not merely random occurrences, but rather systematic, albeit rare, outcomes of the brain's continuous efforts to process, interpret, and organize the constant stream of sensory information it receives from the external world. Our brains are remarkably efficient at this task, seamlessly integrating disparate pieces of data into a coherent and stable narrative of reality. Yet, this very efficiency, built upon sophisticated shortcuts and predictive mechanisms, also leaves room for these curious anomalies. The feeling of already seen is a testament to the brain's powerful pattern-matching capabilities, its relentless drive to find order and familiarity in new inputs. When this system misfires, even for a fraction of a second, the result can be a profound, albeit temporary disruption to our sense of reality. The brain is not a passive recipient of information. It is an active constructor of experience. It filters, interprets, and categorizes. And in doing so, it occasionally makes errors that manifest as these subjective, perceptual, and memory illusions. Understanding this active, constructive nature of the brain is key to comprehending déjà vu and its kin. They are not external intrusions, but internal productions, insights into the very architecture of our minds. The historical journey from mystical explanations to scientific inquiry for phenomena like déjà vu mirrors the broader evolution of psychology itself, moving from introspection and philosophical speculation to empirical observation and neurological investigation. Boirac's contribution was a crucial stepping stone, providing the linguistic foundation that allowed for systematic collection and classification of these experiences. Before a phenomenon can be scientifically studied, it must first be defined and named, allowing researchers to communicate about it consistently and to compare observations. His work, while rooted in the psychic research of his era, laid the groundwork for future psychologists and neuroscientists to apply more rigorous empirical methods. The early psychoanalytic interpretations, though lacking the direct neurological evidence available today, were valuable in highlighting the profound impact of unconscious processes on conscious experience, suggesting that our immediate sensations can be deeply intertwined with hidden layers of our mind. Freud's exploration of repressed desires and Jung's ideas of the collective unconscious, while not universally accepted as explanations for déjà vu today, nevertheless underscored the depth and complexity of the human psyche that these experiences seem to touch upon. They invited a deeper introspection into what these fleeting moments might signify about our inner lives and our relationship to memory and time. The transition from these interpretive models to more mechanistic ones reflects the maturation of psychology as a scientific discipline, moving towards explanations that can be tested, observed, and potentially localized within the brain. The universality of déjà vu across cultures and demographics further reinforces its likely biological and cognitive origins rather than being a purely cultural or psychological construct. While specific interpretations might vary, the core experience itself appears to be a fundamental aspect of human cognition. This widespread occurrence points towards shared neural architectures and processing styles that are common to the human species. The observation that déjà vu peaks in youth and declines with age is a particularly compelling piece of evidence. If it were purely a random anomaly or a spiritual phenomenon, one might not expect such a clear developmental trajectory. Instead, this pattern suggests a link to the developmental changes occurring in the brain, particularly those related to memory formation, novelty detection, and the efficiency of neural networks. Younger brains, with their higher neuroplasticity and rapid learning rates, might be more prone to the subtle misalignments that trigger déjà vu. As the brain matures and neural pathways become more established and efficient, these misalignments may become less frequent. The decline in later life could also be linked to changes in cognitive processing speed and attentional resources, which become less robust with age. This age-related trend provides valuable clues about the underlying mechanisms of déjà vu, shifting the focus away from esoteric explanations and towards verifiable neurocognitive processes. In summary, Part 1 has aimed to provide a comprehensive foundation for our understanding of déjà vu and its relatives. We have formally defined déjà vu as a subjective experience of familiarity that conflicts with the objective reality of a novel situation, carefully distinguishing it from precognition, fantasy, or simple recollection. We traced its etymological roots to Émile Boirac, acknowledging his pivotal role in naming this common but elusive phenomenon. We explored its phenomenology, highlighting the intense yet fleeting feeling of familiarity, the crucial accompanying awareness of its misplacement and its generally neutral emotional tone in healthy individuals. We then discussed its prevalence across different age groups, noting its peak in adolescence and young adulthood and its subsequent decline. Finally, and crucially, we broadened our perspective to include other fascinating false recognitions, such as jamais vu, presque vu, déjà entendu, and déjà visité. By doing so, we have framed déjà vu not as an isolated mystery, but as a specific instance within a larger family of cognitive illusions that reveal the dynamic, constructive, and occasionally fallible nature of human memory and perception. This conceptual groundwork is essential for our subsequent discussions as we transition from defining the what to exploring the how and where of these compelling experiential anomalies within the human brain. We have established a common vocabulary and a shared understanding of the phenomena themselves, preparing us to delve into the intricate neurological and psychological theories that attempt to explain their genesis. The journey continues with a deeper look into the very structures of the brain that orchestrate our sense of familiarity and novelty, setting the stage for Part 2, where we will enter the realm of neurobiology and explore the fascinating connections between déjà vu and the temporal lobes. This intricate dance between subjective experience and objective neural activity is what makes psychology such a captivating field of study, continually bridging the gap between the inner workings of the mind and the tangible structures of the brain. The exploration of these experiential anomalies offers us a unique lens through which to examine the very foundations of our conscious awareness and our understanding of reality. They serve as subtle reminders that the world we perceive is not merely an external given, but an active creation of our own minds, a constant interplay between sensory input and internal interpretation. And sometimes, in those fleeting moments of déjà vu, we catch a glimpse of the scaffolding behind that grand construction. This concludes our foundational overview, preparing us for a deeper dive into the neurological underpinnings of these remarkable mental events. We now transition from the definitional and phenomenological aspects of déjà vu and its relatives, as discussed in Part 1, to a deeper exploration of the underlying biological machinery. This section, Part 2, will focus on the neurological correlates of these experiential anomalies, seeking to understand where in the brain these peculiar sensations might arise, and how the intricate networks of neurons conspire to produce such a profound, yet often fleeting sense of false familiarity. Our journey will lead us predominantly into the brain's temporal lobes, structures intimately involved in memory, perception, and emotional processing. The human brain is an extraordinarily complex organ, a sprawling network of interconnected neurons and glial cells, constantly communicating through electrochemical signals. Our subjective experiences, from the simplest sensation of warmth to the most profound feeling of love or déjà vu are ultimately products of this intricate biological machinery. To understand déjà vu from a neurological perspective, we must first appreciate the brain's fundamental architecture, specifically those regions most consistently implicated in the processing of novelty and familiarity, and the formation and retrieval of memories. The temporal lobes are two of the four major lobes of the cerebral cortex in the mammalian brain, situated beneath the frontal and parietal lobes, largely behind the temples of the head. They are critical for a vast array of higher-order cognitive functions, making them pivotal to our discussion. These functions include, but are not limited to, auditory processing, language comprehension, object recognition, emotion regulation, and, most pertinent to our current discussion, the formation and retrieval of long-term memories. The temporal lobes are not monolithic. They contain a diverse array of specialized regions, each contributing to the overall cognitive landscape. However, for the purposes of understanding déjà vu, our attention will primarily be directed towards the medial temporal lobe structures. The term medial refers to their location towards the middle of the brain on the inner surface of the temporal lobes. These deeply embedded structures form a critical circuit responsible for much of our conscious memory. Let us now embark on a detailed anatomical and functional overview of the key players within the medial temporal lobe: the hippocampus, the parahippocampal gyrus, and the amygdala. These structures do not operate in isolation. Rather, they form a highly interconnected system that works in concert to create a coherent record of our experiences, tagging them with context, location, and emotional significance. A nuanced understanding of their individual roles and their synergistic interactions is paramount to grasping the leading neurological theories of déjà vu. First, we turn our attention to the hippocampus. The name hippocampus is derived from the Greek word for seahorse, a reference to its distinctive curved shape, which indeed resembles the marine creature. There are two hippocampi, one in each medial temporal lobe, symmetrically positioned. This brain structure is arguably one of the most studied and well-understood regions in neuroscience, largely due to its unequivocal role in memory formation. Specifically, the hippocampus is absolutely critical for the formation of new episodic memories. Episodic memories are our personal recollections of specific events, complete with their spatial and temporal context. They are the what, where, and when of our lives. Remembering what you had for breakfast this morning, where you parked your car, or the details of your last birthday party. Without a functioning hippocampus, an individual would be unable to form new conscious memories of events, a condition known as anterograde amnesia. The most famous case illustrating this was that of Henry Molaison, widely known as HM, a patient who underwent bilateral removal of his hippocampi and adjacent temporal lobe structures in 1953 to alleviate severe epilepsy. While his intellect and most old memories remained intact, HM was profoundly unable to form any new episodic memories. Each new encounter was forgotten moments later, trapping him in a perpetual present. His case provided definitive evidence of the hippocampus's indispensable role in transforming short-term memories into long-term ones, a process known as memory consolidation. The hippocampus receives vast amounts of information from various cortical areas, including sensory regions, visual, auditory, somatosensory, associative areas that integrate different sensory inputs, and areas involved in spatial processing. It acts as a kind of temporary storage buffer and an indexer for new memories. When we experience something new, the hippocampus binds together the disparate elements of that experience, the sights, sounds, smells, emotions, and spatial context, into a cohesive, episode. It then helps to consolidate these newly formed memories by facilitating communication with the neocortex, where long-term storage eventually occurs. The hippocampus is particularly vital for spatial memory and navigation, constructing mental maps of our environment. This function is evident in studies of taxi drivers, for example, who show enlargement of their posterior hippocampus as they acquire extensive spatial knowledge of city layouts. The cells within the hippocampus, known as place cells, fire specifically when an animal is in a particular location, further underscoring its role in spatial processing. Adjacent to the hippocampus and forming a critical part of the medial temporal lobe memory system is the parahippocampal gyrus. This cortical region surrounds the hippocampus and plays a crucial role in scene recognition and spatial memory. While the hippocampus is involved in forming the episodic memory of a scene, the parahippocampal gyrus is more involved in the perception and encoding of the visual spatial layout of scenes, including the features that define a particular place. It processes information about the environment, including landmarks, boundaries, and contextual cues that define a location. The parahippocampal place area, a subregion within the parahippocampal gyrus, is selectively activated when individuals view images of places or scenes, but not faces or objects, highlighting its specialized role. This region acts as a gateway for much of the sensory information that feeds into the hippocampus, providing it with the rich contextual details necessary for forming comprehensive episodic memories. When we encounter a new environment, the parahippocampal gyrus rapidly processes its visual features, laying the groundwork for the hippocampus to integrate this spatial information into a new memory trace. Its role in processing scenes is particularly relevant to déjà vu, as many déjà vu experiences are triggered by encountering a new physical environment that feels eerily familiar. The parahippocampal gyrus might be responsible for generating that initial sense of familiarity with a scene, even if the hippocampus hasn't fully integrated it into a coherent new memory. Finally, we consider the amygdala, a pair of almond-shaped nuclei located deep within the medial temporal lobes, anterior to the hippocampus. The amygdala is primarily known for its central role in emotional processing, particularly in the generation and regulation of fear, anxiety, and aggression. However, its relevance to memory, and therefore to déjà vu, extends beyond mere emotional reaction. The amygdala is intimately involved in emotional memory formation and retrieval. It acts as an emotional tagger for our experiences. When an event is emotionally salient, whether positive or negative, the amygdala enhances the encoding and consolidation of that memory in other brain regions, particularly the hippocampus. This is why highly emotional events tend to be remembered more vividly and for longer durations. The amygdala's strong connections to the hippocampus and other memory-related structures mean that emotional states can profoundly influence how memories are formed, stored, and retrieved. For example, stressful experiences can lead to vivid flashbulb memories, where the emotional intensity biases the brain to encode every detail. In the context of déjà vu, the amygdala might contribute to the distinct emotional tone, be it mild intrigue or mild unease, that often accompanies the experience. A momentary misattribution of familiarity could trigger a subtle emotional response within the amygdala, which then feeds back into the conscious experience, amplifying the sense of oddness or significance. These three structures, the hippocampus, the parahippocampal gyrus, and the amygdala, work in a sophisticated, interconnected manner. Information flows from sensory cortices to the parahippocampal gyrus, then to the hippocampus for integration and memory formation. Simultaneously, the amygdala processes the emotional salience of the incoming information, modulating the strength of memory encoding. This complex circuit, often referred to as the medial temporal lobe memory system, is responsible for our ability to learn, remember, and navigate our world based on past experiences. It is a finely tuned system, and like any complex system, it is susceptible to occasional, transient disruptions. The central thesis of this part of our lecture is that déjà vu, from a neurological perspective, is most likely a benign, transient glitch or misfiring within this precisely coordinated medial temporal lobe memory system. It is not an indication of paranormal activity or severe cognitive dysfunction in healthy individuals, but rather a momentary desynchronization or misinterpretation of signals within these vital brain regions. Let us now explore the leading neurological theories that attempt to explain déjà vu, building upon our understanding of these brain structures. One prominent theory is the dual processing theory, also sometimes referred to as the desynchronization theory or the divided perception hypothesis. This theory posits that déjà vu occurs when two normally synchronous cognitive processes, specifically perception and memory retrieval, fall out of sync for a fleeting moment. In normal perception, when we encounter a new scene or situation, our brain processes the sensory input and simultaneously registers its novelty. There is a seamless integration of the "what I am seeing" with the "I have not seen this before." The dual processing theory suggests that déjà vu arises when these two processes become momentarily decoupled. For instance, the brain might rapidly process the sensory input of a new scene, and this initial processing, perhaps due to a brief attentional lapse or a minor neural hiccup, might create a fleeting implicit memory trace or a rapid assessment of familiarity before conscious awareness fully registers the novelty of the situation. When conscious awareness then catches up, the brain interprets the pre-existing implicit familiarity as a sign of having truly experienced the situation before, even though the conscious processing of novelty is still active. This creates the cognitive conflict, the feeling of "I know this," due to the rapid, perhaps subconscious processing of features, simultaneously with the knowledge of "I have never seen this before," from conscious, deliberate appraisal. To illustrate this, imagine walking into a room you have never visited. Normally, your brain processes the visual input, identifies objects and spatial relationships, and simultaneously registers this as a new experience. According to the dual processing theory, in a déjà vu event, there might be a very rapid, initial processing of the room's features that triggers a sense of familiarity at an unconscious level. This could be due to a slight delay in the brain areas responsible for explicitly tagging memories as new or old. When the conscious memory system then tries to process the room, it encounters this pre-existing, albeit implicit, familiarity signal. It's like your brain is accidentally checking the familiar box on a new item before it has fully processed that it's a new item. The result is the perplexing sensation of already seen. This theory emphasizes the asynchronous activity of different neural pathways involved in novelty detection and familiarity assessment. A related and often overlapping concept is the neurological delay hypothesis, which offers a more specific mechanism for the desynchronization. This hypothesis suggests that déjà vu might arise from a momentary delay in the transmission of information along neural pathways within the brain. Imagine that sensory information, say from your eyes, reaches two different parts of the brain along slightly different routes, with one route being infinitesimally slower than the other. If one pathway, perhaps the one responsible for registering familiarity, processes the information a millisecond before the pathway responsible for registering novelty, the brain might briefly experience the input as familiar before the new signal fully arrives and integrates. For example, a visual scene is perceived, and the information travels along two distinct neural pathways to the medial temporal lobe. Pathway A processes the immediate perceptual details, leading to the feeling of, "this is happening now." Pathway B, perhaps slightly delayed, processes the context or familiarity of the scene. If Pathway B's signal for familiarity arrives at the conscious processing centers a fraction of a second before Pathway A's signal for novelty, the brain might incorrectly interpret this initial familiarity as a past experience. Then, when the novelty signal from Pathway A finally arrives, it conflicts with the already established and false sense of familiarity. This creates the paradox of déjà vu, the sensation of having experienced something before, combined with the rational understanding that it is new. This hypothesis points to the temporal precision of neural processing as a key factor. The brain typically integrates vast amounts of information with incredible speed and synchronicity. Even a minute disruption in this timing, a momentary stutter in the neural symphony, could lead to these transient glitches in our subjective experience of reality. This is akin to a brief echo in the brain's processing, where a new input resonates with a very recent, but separate, processing of the same input, creating a false sense of an older memory. The most compelling and robust evidence supporting the temporal lobe's involvement in déjà vu comes from clinical observations, particularly in individuals with temporal lobe epilepsy, TLE. Temporal lobe epilepsy is a chronic neurological condition characterized by recurrent, unprovoked seizures that originate in the temporal lobes of the brain. The seizures are caused by abnormal, excessive, or synchronized neuronal activity in these regions. What makes TLE particularly relevant to our discussion is that déjà vu is a remarkably common symptom experienced by many individuals with this condition, often occurring as part of the aura that precedes a seizure. An aura is a subjective sensation or perception that an individual experiences before the onset of a seizure, serving as a warning sign. These auras are often specific to the brain region where the seizure originates. In TLE, auras are frequently sensory, emotional, or cognitive in nature. Déjà vu is one of the most frequently reported cognitive auras in TLE patients. Unlike the fleeting, often benign déjà vu experienced by healthy individuals, déjà vu in TLE can be much more intense, prolonged, and often distressing. Patients might report a profound, overwhelming sense of having experienced the current moment before, sometimes accompanied by other unusual sensations like fear, strange smells, or a feeling of detachment. This déjà vu can last for seconds or even minutes, preceding the full motor seizure or remaining as an isolated event. The fact that stimulating specific areas of the temporal lobe during brain surgery, a procedure sometimes performed to locate seizure foci, can reliably induce déjà vu-like sensations further strengthens the link between this brain region and the phenomenon. Electrophysiological studies in TLE patients have revealed abnormal neural activity patterns, such as transient discharges or disruptions in rhythm, within the hippocampus, amygdala, and parahippocampal gyrus during déjà vu experiences. These clinical observations provide a powerful natural experiment that helps us pinpoint the specific neural circuits responsible for generating the feeling of familiarity and recognition, and how their transient dysfunction can lead to the false familiarity of déjà vu. The clinical presentation of déjà vu in TLE patients provides critical insights into the general population's experience. If déjà vu is reliably triggered by abnormal electrical activity in the temporal lobes, in a pathological state, it strongly suggests that even in healthy individuals, it arises from momentary benign micro-dysfunctions or transient misfirings within the same neural networks. It is not necessarily a seizure or a sign of pathology in healthy individuals, but rather a brief, self-correcting anomaly of normal brain function. The specific areas implicated in TLE-related déjà vu, predominantly the hippocampus and parahippocampal gyrus, reinforce their role in episodic memory formation and scene recognition. The strong emotional component sometimes reported by TLE patients also points to the amygdala's involvement. It suggests that the feeling of déjà vu might arise when these structures are briefly overstimulated or desynchronized, leading to an unwarranted sense of familiarity. Furthermore, studies utilizing functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI, in healthy individuals have begun to shed light on the neural correlates of déjà vu, albeit with inherent challenges in capturing such a fleeting and spontaneous event. Researchers have employed clever experimental designs, such as inducing a déjà vu-like feeling by exposing participants to a scene briefly, and then again later, or by using virtual reality environments that subtly manipulate familiarity. While not perfectly replicating spontaneous déjà vu, these studies have shown activation patterns consistent with the medial temporal lobe, particularly the parahippocampal gyrus, during subjective reports of déjà vu-like experiences. Other studies using magnetoencephalography, MEG, or electroencephalography, EEG, which measure brain electrical activity with high temporal precision, have also identified specific patterns of brain oscillations, neural rhythms, that change during déjà vu, indicating a transient disruption in the normal synchronization of brain waves. These studies further support the idea of a momentary desynchronization or brief disruption in the brain's normal processing of new information, leading to the misattribution of familiarity. The intricate interplay of information flow within the medial temporal lobe memory system is crucial to its proper functioning. Sensory information from various cortical areas converges on the parahippocampal gyrus, which processes scene and contextual details. This processed information then feeds into the hippocampus, where it is integrated and bound into new episodic memories. The amygdala, meanwhile, adds an emotional tag to these experiences, enhancing their salience. In a healthy, normally functioning brain, this process is seamless. New information is correctly identified as new, and old information is correctly identified as old. The brain's novelty detection system, largely involving the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, is constantly active, flagging incoming stimuli as either familiar or novel. Déjà vu, according to the neurological perspective, represents a transient failure or miscalibration of this novelty detection and familiarity assessment system. One way this can happen is through what is known as rapid implicit processing. Imagine you glance at a new scene very quickly, perhaps while distracted or while your attention is elsewhere. Your brain might process some basic features of that scene, its general layout, prominent objects, at a subconscious or implicit level. This rapid, partial processing creates a very weak, non-conscious memory trace. A moment later, when you consciously focus on the exact same scene, your brain's recognition system encounters this pre-existing implicit trace. The ease with which it processes the scene the second time, its perceptual fluency, is then misinterpreted. Instead of correctly attributing this fluency to the very recent, brief, implicit exposure, the brain mistakenly attributes it to a much older, forgotten memory, thus triggering the sensation of déjà vu. This is similar to why rereading a challenging text can feel easier the second time. Your brain is processing it more fluently. In déjà vu, this fluency is misattributed to a prior long-term memory. Another perspective within the neurological framework focuses on the concept of divided attention. It suggests that when we are not fully attending to an environment or an event, our brain might encode parts of it separately. For example, if you are looking at a new room, but your attention is split between its overall layout and a conversation you are having, the brain might process the visual information in a fragmented way. Later, when you fully attend to the room, the brain tries to assemble these fragments. If some fragments are processed with a higher degree of familiarity, perhaps because they resemble a generic schema or were briefly encoded earlier, the brain might mistakenly stitch together a composite that feels familiar even though the complete coherent experience is novel. This is less about a single global lag and more about the brain trying to synthesize disparate, perhaps partially encoded, pieces of information into a coherent whole, and in doing so, misattributing familiarity to the composite. The sophisticated nature of the brain's internal timing mechanisms also plays a crucial role. Neurons fire in precise sequences and rhythms, and communication between different brain regions relies on this exquisite temporal precision. Deviations, however minute, from this optimal timing can lead to errors in information processing. The neurological delay hypothesis, as discussed, is a direct example of this. If a new sensory input is processed by one pathway, say, the path that gives rise to a feeling of familiarity, a few milliseconds faster than by another pathway, the path that gives rise to the conscious recognition of novelty, a brief, illusory sense of already seen can occur before the brain integrates the complete information and corrects the discrepancy. This is a very fine-grained temporal error occurring at the level of neural network synchronization. Consider the role of the rhinal cortices, specifically the perirhinal cortex and entorhinal cortex, which are adjacent to the hippocampus and parahippocampal gyrus within the medial temporal lobe. These regions are thought to be crucial for processing object recognition and contextual memory. Some theories propose that déjà vu arises when the perirhinal cortex, which is involved in detecting familiarity without necessarily recalling specific details, is activated for a new stimulus, while the hippocampus, responsible for recalling specific episodes, is not. This could lead to a feeling of, "I know this," familiarity signal from perirhinal cortex, without the accompanying how or when I know it, lack of specific episodic recall from hippocampus. This creates the characteristic disconnect of déjà vu. The brain senses familiarity but cannot pinpoint its source, leading to the eerie sense that it must have been seen before in some forgotten context. In sum, the neurological understanding of déjà vu converges on the idea of a temporary, harmless malfunction within the medial temporal lobe memory system, particularly involving the intricate interplay of the hippocampus, parahippocampal gyrus, and amygdala. Whether it is a desynchronization of parallel processing streams, a momentary delay in neural transmission, or a misattribution of perceptual fluency, the core idea remains. Déjà vu is a cognitive illusion generated by the brain's own sophisticated, yet occasionally fallible mechanisms for encoding, retrieving, and assessing the familiarity of information. The evidence from temporal lobe epilepsy provides the strongest clinical corroboration for the involvement of these specific brain regions, demonstrating that when their activity is perturbed, déjà vu-like sensations can be reliably induced. This neurological perspective firmly places déjà vu within the realm of scientific inquiry, demystifying it from any paranormal associations and positioning it as a fascinating subject for understanding the brain's normal, albeit sometimes glitchy, operations. The sustained focus on the temporal lobe as the primary site of déjà vu generation is not arbitrary. Its unique anatomical position, serving as a hub for sensory integration and memory consolidation, makes it uniquely susceptible to producing such experiences. Imagine the temporal lobe as a sophisticated processing center, receiving continuous streams of information from our eyes, ears, and other senses. It is tasked with making sense of this deluge of data, categorizing it, and determining its significance. When a new piece of information arrives, this center must quickly assess whether it is truly novel or if it matches something already stored in memory. This comparison process is incredibly fast and mostly unconscious. The feeling of familiarity or novelty is a metacognitive readout of this rapid assessment. If this assessment is momentarily skewed, then the conscious experience reflects that skew. For instance, consider the sheer volume of information our brains process in a single second. Our eyes alone send millions of bits of data. Our auditory system processes complex sound waves. All of this must be parsed, interpreted, and assigned meaning. Déjà vu in this context can be seen as a very subtle, transient error in this massive, continuous processing. It's a testament to the brain's overall robustness that these errors are so infrequent and typically benign. Most of the time, our brain flawlessly categorizes new experiences as new and old ones as old. The occasional déjà vu event highlights the edge cases, the moments when the system is operating at its very limits of precision. The concept of a neural hiccup, or a micro-seizure, has been used informally to describe the momentary nature of déjà vu in healthy individuals. While not actual seizures in the clinical sense, this analogy points to the idea of a transient, localized burst of abnormal electrical activity or a momentary disruption in the brain's normal rhythm. Such a localized, fleeting event could theoretically cause a brief misattribution of familiarity without leading to a full-blown neurological event. The brain is constantly maintaining a delicate balance of excitation and inhibition. If this balance is momentarily tipped in a particular circuit within the temporal lobe, it could generate a spurious signal of familiarity. The implications of this neurological understanding are significant. It shifts déjà vu from being an inexplicable, mystical event to a tangible phenomenon rooted in brain biology. This allows for empirical investigation using neuroimaging techniques, electrophysiology, and patient studies. While direct, real-time observation of a spontaneous déjà vu event in a healthy brain remains challenging due to its fleeting and unpredictable nature, the accumulating evidence points consistently to the medial temporal lobe system. The fact that researchers can induce déjà vu-like sensations by stimulating specific brain regions provides strong causal evidence, not just correlational. This is a crucial distinction in scientific inquiry. Correlation shows two things happen together, but causation shows one thing causes another. The ability to induce déjà vu by stimulating temporal lobe structures strongly suggests a causal link. Furthermore, understanding the neural underpinnings of déjà vu has broader implications for our understanding of memory itself. It reinforces the idea that memory is not a perfect, unchangeable recording like a video camera. Instead, it is a dynamic, reconstructive process constantly being updated, reinterpreted, and sometimes prone to errors. Déjà vu highlights the brain's tendency to generalize from past experiences, to seek patterns and make predictions. When a new scene or event contains elements that strongly resemble components of a previous, perhaps implicitly processed experience, the brain's pattern-matching system might prematurely flag it as familiar. This pattern completion mechanism, which is normally highly adaptive for quick recognition and learning, can, in rare instances, lead to the misattribution of familiarity. Consider the role of attentional filtering in this process. Our brains are bombarded with sensory information every second. To avoid overload, we selectively attend to certain stimuli while filtering out others. If, for a brief moment, our attentional filter is slightly off, allowing partial, non-conscious processing of a new scene, and then we consciously re-engage with that same scene, the brain might encounter an already pre-processed version of it. The feeling of knowing that accompanies déjà vu could be the brain's metacognitive system registering this pre-processing, but misinterpreting its origin. This scenario is particularly relevant to the dual processing and divided attention theories. It underscores the intricate relationship between attention, perception, and memory formation. Our memories are only as good as the information we attend to and how thoroughly we process it. The consistency with which the temporal lobes, particularly the hippocampus, parahippocampal gyrus, and amygdala, are implicated across various neurological and experimental contexts, forms a strong foundation for understanding déjà vu. These regions are specialized for processing complex sensory information, forming new conscious memories, recognizing scenes and contexts, and attaching emotional significance to experiences. Their coordinated activity is essential for a coherent, subjective reality. When this coordination is momentarily disturbed, the brain's output can be the peculiar and compelling sensation of déjà vu. This neurological lens demystifies the phenomenon, transforming it from a source of bewilderment into a fascinating window into the dynamic and often surprising mechanisms of our own minds. It is a testament to the incredible precision required for consciousness itself, and how even slight deviations can lead to profoundly unique, subjective experiences. This detailed exploration of the neurological correlates of déjà vu concludes part 2 of our lecture. We have moved from the subjective experience to the underlying brain structures and processes, highlighting the critical role of the medial temporal lobe memory system. We have examined theories proposing desynchronization and neural delays, and critically, we have underscored the robust evidence derived from the study of temporal lobe epilepsy. This foundation in neurobiology now allows us to shift our focus in part 3 to the broader architecture of memory, examining how our memory system, in its inherent complexity and reconstructive nature, is prone to errors, illusions, and misattributions, further contextualizing déjà vu as a natural byproduct of a highly sophisticated yet fallible cognitive system. Understanding these underlying mechanisms helps to normalize the experience, explaining it as a feature of our biology rather than an inexplicable anomaly. The intricate dance of neurons, the precise timing of electrical impulses, and the complex integration of sensory information all contribute to the rich tapestry of our conscious experience, and occasionally to the fleeting, mysterious sensation of déjà vu. This neurological journey provides a bedrock of understanding, showing us how our subjective reality is constructed from the very cells and circuits within our brains. We now transition from the intricate neural mechanisms, the where and how of déjà vu within the temporal lobes, to a broader yet equally crucial examination of the very system in which these phenomena occur: human memory. Part 3 of our lecture, The Architecture of Memory, Errors, Illusions, and Reconstructions, will argue that déjà vu is best understood not as a paranormal event, nor even as a severe neurological malfunction, but as a normal, albeit infrequent, byproduct of a complex, highly adaptive, yet inherently fallible memory system. To fully appreciate déjà vu, we must first confront a common misconception, the idea that human memory functions like a perfect video recorder, faithfully capturing and storing every detail of our experiences for flawless playback at a later date. This popular analogy, while appealing in its simplicity, is fundamentally misleading. Instead, psychological and neurological research has unequivocally demonstrated that memory is a dynamic, reconstructive, and often imperfect process, constantly being shaped, reinterpreted, and even fabricated by our minds. Our brains are not passive recording devices, they are active constructors of reality. When we recall a memory, we are not simply pressing a play button on a stored file. Rather, we are engaging in a process of reconstruction, piecing together fragments of information, influenced by our current beliefs, emotions, and external cues. This reconstructive nature, while highly adaptive for navigating a complex world, also makes our memories susceptible to various errors, distortions, and illusions. Déjà vu, in this context, can be seen as one such fascinating illusion, a momentary glitch in the vast and intricate machinery of memory, highlighting the inherent limits and surprising capabilities of our cognitive architecture. To lay the groundwork for this understanding, let us first outline the major models of memory, distinguishing between its different forms and stages. The most widely accepted conceptualization often begins with a multi-store model, such as the Atkinson-Shiffrin model proposed in the late 1960s, which posits three distinct memory stores: sensory memory, short-term memory, and long-term memory. While more nuanced models have emerged, this framework provides a useful starting point for understanding how information flows through our cognitive system. Sensory memory is the shortest form of memory, lasting only a fraction of a second to a few seconds. It acts as a buffer for incoming sensory information from our environment. Think of it as a momentary afterimage or echo of what we have just seen, heard, or touched. For example, if you quickly glance at a scene, sensory memory briefly holds the visual information, allowing your brain a fleeting moment to select what to attend to. Most of this information is quickly discarded, but the small fraction that we attend to is then transferred to the next stage. Next is short-term memory, STM, a temporary storage system with a limited capacity. It holds a small amount of information, typically around 7 plus or minus 2 chunks of information, for a brief period, usually around 20 to 30 seconds, unless we actively rehearse it. For instance, remembering a phone number just long enough to dial it relies on your short-term memory. However, a more contemporary and functionally accurate concept has largely replaced the simple notion of STM, working memory, WM. Working memory is not just a passive storage bin. It is an active mental workspace where information is held and manipulated. Coined by Alan Baddeley and Graham Hitch in 1974, the working memory model proposes a multi-component system. It includes a phonological loop for processing auditory and verbal information, e.g. rehearsing a phone number in your head, a visuospatial sketchpad for holding and manipulating visual and spatial information, e.g. mentally rotating an object, and a central executive which acts as an attentional control system, allocating resources to the other components and managing cognitive tasks. Later, an episodic buffer was added, serving as a limited-capacity temporary storage system that integrates information from the phonological loop, visuospatial sketchpad, and long-term memory to create coherent episodes. Working memory is crucial for everyday tasks like problem-solving, decision-making, and understanding language. Its dynamic nature means it is constantly processing current perceptions and integrating them with retrieved memories. This active processing can be highly relevant to déjà vu, as a momentary misstep in integrating current perceptual information with existing memory traces could lead to the sensation of false familiarity. Information that is processed and encoded effectively in working memory can then be transferred into long-term memory, LTM. Long-term memory is the virtually limitless storehouse of our experiences, knowledge, and skills. Unlike short-term memory, information in long-term memory can be stored for minutes, hours, days, years, or even a lifetime. It is within the vast expanse of long-term memory that déjà vu finds its most direct relevance. Long-term memory is broadly divided into two major categories: explicit, declarative memory, and implicit, non-declarative memory. Explicit, declarative memory refers to memories that can be consciously recalled and declared. It is our conscious recollection of facts and events. Explicit memory is further subdivided into two main types. Episodic memory. This is our autobiographical memory, the story of our lives. It consists of conscious recollections of specific personal experiences, complete with their spatial and temporal context, the what, where, and when of an event. Remembering your last birthday party, the first time you drove a car, or what you had for dinner last night are all examples of episodic memories. They allow us to mentally time travel, to re-experience past events. This type of memory is profoundly reconstructive. When we recall an episodic memory, we are not retrieving a perfect video recording. Instead, we are piecing together fragments of information, and these reconstructions can be influenced by our current state, expectations, and new information. Déjà vu, as we will elaborate, is primarily an anomaly within this episodic memory system. It is a moment when a current, novel experience is mistakenly tagged as a past episodic memory, even though the specific episode cannot be consciously retrieved. The feeling of having been there before is strong, but the conscious memory of a specific past instance is absent. Semantic memory. This is our general knowledge about the world, our repository of facts, concepts, and meanings. It includes knowledge of vocabulary, historical dates, scientific principles, and common knowledge, e.g., Paris is the capital of France. Dogs are mammals. Unlike episodic memories, semantic memories are not tied to a specific personal experience or a particular time and place of learning. While you might remember when you learned about the capital of France, making it an episodic memory, the fact itself, Paris is the capital of France, is a semantic memory. Semantic memory provides the framework for our understanding of the world and often provides context for our episodic memories. Implicit, non-declarative memory refers to memories that influence our behavior without conscious awareness or recollection. These memories are often demonstrated through performance rather than conscious recall. It includes procedural memory. This is memory for skills and habits. It allows us to perform actions automatically without conscious thought. Examples include riding a bicycle, typing on a keyboard, or playing a musical instrument. Once learned, these skills are often difficult to verbalize but are expressed through action. Priming. This refers to the phenomenon where exposure to one stimulus influences the response to a subsequent stimulus, often without conscious awareness. For instance, if you recently saw the word doctor, you might be quicker to recognize the word nurse later, even if you don't consciously remember seeing doctor. Priming is particularly relevant to certain theories of déjà vu. The concept of perceptual fluency, where prior implicit exposure to an environment or its components makes later processing of that same environment easier, is a form of priming. This ease of processing can then be misattributed as conscious familiarity, leading to déjà vu, classical and operant conditioning. These are forms of implicit memory where associations are learned between stimuli or between behaviors and their consequences, influencing future responses automatically. Now, let us bring these memory models back to our central topic. Déjà vu is primarily framed as a specific anomaly within the episodic memory system. It is not a failure to remember a fact, semantic memory, nor is it a problem with a skill, procedural memory. Instead, it is a disruption in the seamless encoding, storage, or retrieval of personal, context-specific experiences. Specifically, déjà vu appears to be a failure of source monitoring, a metacognitive process by which we attribute the origin of our memories, thoughts, and beliefs. When we experience déjà vu, our brain is failing to correctly identify the source of the feeling of familiarity. It feels like it came from a past experience, but our conscious mind tells us it's a new experience. The source of the familiarity is misattributed. To fully grasp how déjà vu fits into this framework, it is imperative to take an extensive tour of other common memory errors and illusions. By illustrating how easily our memory can be distorted, implanted, or misattributed, we will position déjà vu not as a unique, inexplicable anomaly, but as just one more fascinating crack in the facade of a perfect, video recorder-like memory system. These errors are not signs of a malfunctioning brain in the general sense. Rather, they are the expected consequences of a highly adaptive system that prioritizes efficiency and coherence over absolute factual accuracy. One of the most common and insightful memory errors is source amnesia, also known as a source monitoring error. This occurs when a person remembers a piece of information or an event, but forgets how or where they acquired that information. The content of the memory is intact, but its origin, its source tag, is lost or misattributed. For example, you might remember a fascinating fact, but you cannot recall whether you read it in a book, heard it on a podcast, or were told by a friend. Or, more profoundly, you might remember an event, but you cannot differentiate if it was a real experience, a vivid dream, or something you imagined. Source amnesia is a powerful demonstration of the brain's tendency to separate the content of a memory from its contextual details. It suggests that our memory system often treats what happened as distinct from when and where it happened. This decoupling is not inherently bad. It allows for flexibility in memory retrieval. However, it also opens the door for misattributions. In the context of déjà vu, a strong argument can be made that it is a specific instance of source monitoring failure. The brain might be experiencing a strong sense of familiarity with a current scene or situation, the what, but it is unable to accurately retrieve or identify the source of that familiarity. This could be because the familiarity signal is very weak, implicit, or arose from a very recent non-conscious exposure. Lacking a clear, identifiable source, the brain defaults to the most compelling explanation. This must have been seen before, but I can't consciously recall the specific instance. This internal conflict creates the sensation of déjà vu. The feeling of I know this is accurate in some sense, but the attribution of that feeling to a distinct past event is incorrect due to a source monitoring error. The feeling of déjà vu can be so compelling precisely because the familiarity signal is robust, even if its origin is obscure. Closely related to source amnesia is the phenomenon of cryptomnesia. This term derived from the Greek kryptos, hidden, and mnesis, memory, refers to unintentional plagiarism where a person genuinely believes that a thought, idea, or piece of work they have produced is original when in fact it is a forgotten memory of something they previously encountered. Cryptomnesia demonstrates that information can be stored in our long-term memory and influence our conscious thoughts and creative processes without us being aware of its source. A classic example might be a songwriter who composes a melody they believe to be entirely new, only to later discover it is remarkably similar to a song they heard years ago and had completely forgotten. Similarly, an author might construct a unique plotline that, unbeknownst to them, mirrors a forgotten story they once read. The memory is hidden in their minds, influencing their output without conscious retrieval of its origin. Cryptomnesia offers a compelling parallel to déjà vu. Both involve a lack of conscious awareness of the source of information. In cryptomnesia, the forgotten memory is experienced as a new inspiration or original thought. In déjà vu, the fleeting familiarity of a new scene is experienced as a profound but unrecallable past event. Both highlight the fascinating reality that our brains can process and store information at an implicit level, influencing our conscious experience in ways we don't fully comprehend. The feeling of newness in cryptomnesia and the feeling of oldness in déjà vu are both products of a system that struggles to correctly tag the origin of its own output, leading to these subjective cognitive illusions. It emphasizes that memory is less about perfect recall and more about continuous construction, where new and old information can blur and blend, leading to subtle and sometimes profound misattributions. Perhaps one of the most impactful lines of research demonstrating the malleability and reconstructive nature of memory comes from the work of Dr. Elizabeth Loftus and her colleagues on the misinformation effect. The misinformation effect refers to the phenomenon where a person's recall of an event becomes less accurate due to exposure to misleading information supplied after the event. This research has profound implications for eyewitness testimony and highlights just how fragile and easily altered our memories can be. In classic experiments conducted by Loftus, participants would watch a video of a car accident. Afterward, some participants were asked, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? While others were asked, how fast were the cars going when they hit each other? Even a subtle change in the verb, smashed versus hit, significantly influenced participants' speed estimates, with smashed leading to higher estimates. More strikingly, a week later, when asked if they saw broken glass in the video, there was none. Those who heard smashed were significantly more likely to falsely report seeing broken glass. This demonstrated that the post-event misinformation, the leading verb, had actually altered their memory of the original event. The new, misleading information effectively integrated itself into the existing memory trace, corrupting it. The misinformation effect illustrates several key points relevant to déjà vu. Firstly, memory is not a fixed, immutable recording. It is dynamic and reconstructive, constantly being updated and modified. Secondly, external suggestion or even subtle linguistic cues can profoundly influence our recollections. This malleability means that the boundaries between what truly happened and what we think happened are much more permeable than we often assume. If our memories can be subtly altered by external suggestions, it's not a stretch to imagine that internal cognitive processes could also lead to similar errors or misattributions, such as those seen in déjà vu. The misinformation effect shows that the brain is not afraid to fill in the gaps or integrate new data into existing schemas to maintain a coherent narrative, even if it leads to inaccuracies. This reconstructive tendency can lead to genuine false memories, bringing us to our next major point. Building upon the insights from the misinformation effect, the research on false memories provides an even more striking demonstration of memory's constructive nature. False memories are recollections of events that never actually happened, or distorted recollections of real events. What makes this area of research so compelling and sometimes concerning is that these false memories can be incredibly vivid, detailed, and held with high confidence, indistinguishable from genuine memories by the rememberer. Elizabeth Loftus, among others, has been a leading figure in demonstrating the ease with which false memories can be created. One of her most famous paradigms is the Lost in the Mall study. Participants were given several childhood stories, some true, corroborated by family members, and one false, e.g., being lost in a shopping mall as a child. After repeated interviews and encouragement to recall details, a significant percentage of participants began to remember the false event, often adding rich, specific details that they believed were genuine recollections. Other research has successfully implanted false memories of taking hot air balloon rides, committing minor crimes, or experiencing a specific childhood illness, often using doctored photographs or suggestive narrative techniques. The creation of false memories highlights the brain's profound drive for narrative coherence. Our minds constantly strive to create a consistent and logical story of our lives. If a suggestion, whether external or internal, resonates with existing schemas or expectations, the brain can construct an entire memory around it, even if it has no basis in reality. The brain draws upon general knowledge, semantic facts, and even imagination to fill in the gaps and create a plausible, emotionally resonant account. The fact that these false memories can feel so real and be held with such conviction is a testament to the brain's powerful constructive abilities. How does this relate to déjà vu? If the brain can construct entire, detailed memories of events that never occurred, it is a much smaller step for it to simply misattribute a feeling of familiarity to a genuinely novel experience. Déjà vu can be viewed as a very brief, mild, and self-correcting false memory of a past event. The brain receives a perceptual input, generates a strong familiarity signal, perhaps due to partial processing, schema matching, or a neural hiccup, and then, in its drive for coherence, briefly reconstructs a past experience to justify that feeling of familiarity, even if it cannot fully recall the details of that past event. The immediate realization that the memory is false, the conflict of signals we discussed in Part 1, is what distinguishes déjà vu from a persistent, pathological false memory. In déjà vu, the brain quickly self-corrects, recognizing the incongruity. But for that fleeting moment, it has generated a false sense of already seen. This powerfully demonstrates that our memory system is not a passive archive, but an active, creative storyteller, sometimes prone to charming, albeit illusory, narrative twists. Beyond specific errors like source amnesia and false memories, a broader theoretical framework, schema theory, helps to explain how our brains organize information and why memory can be so reconstructive. A schema, plural, schemata, is a mental framework or template that organizes and interprets information. Schemas are built from our past experiences and knowledge, forming generalized concepts about objects, people, situations, or events. For example, you have a restaurant schema that includes expectations about entering, being seated, ordering food, eating, paying, and leaving. Schemas profoundly influence how we perceive, encode, store, and retrieve information. We tend to notice and remember information that is consistent with our schemas. If something fits our pre-existing mental framework, it's easier to process and recall. Distort or forget information that is inconsistent with our schemas. Information that does not fit neatly into our mental categories might be ignored or altered to fit. Fill in missing details based on our schemas. If a memory is incomplete, our brain will often infer or invent details that are consistent with our schema for that type of event. This is why witnesses to the same event can often recall different details or even recall details that were never present but fit their expectations. In the context of déjà vu, schema theory offers a compelling explanation, particularly for theories emphasizing rapid, implicit processing or the perceptual fluency hypothesis. A new situation or environment might not be identical to any past specific memory, but it might strongly match a general schema or template already stored in our minds. For example, you might walk into a new coffee shop, and while you've never been there before, its layout, decor, or ambiance strongly matches your general coffee shop schema, or perhaps a schema of a particular architectural style you've encountered many times. Your brain recognizes the schema and the ease with which it processes this new, schema-consistent environment, perceptual fluency. However, it mistakenly attributes this familiarity with the schema to a specific past event at that exact location. The brain senses, this feels right, this is familiar, because it matches a pre-existing mental model, but then misinterprets this familiarity as I have been here before. This schema-driven pattern completion can lead to the feeling of déjà vu, without any actual prior exposure to the specific novel situation. This brings us to the broader concept of the brain as a pattern completer. Our brains are incredibly adept at recognizing patterns, even from incomplete or noisy data. This is a highly adaptive mechanism. It allows us to quickly identify objects, understand speech in noisy environments, and make predictions about the world based on limited information. Neural networks, the computational models inspired by the brain's structure, are designed precisely for this purpose, to learn patterns and complete them when given partial input. In the context of memory, this pattern completion mechanism means that if a new sensory input shares even a few salient features with a past experience or even a generic schema, the brain's memory system might fill in the blanks and activate a full familiarity signal, even if the match is not complete or truly episodic. Déjà vu could be a direct result of this pattern completion mechanism being overzealous. A novel scene might have a layout, a combination of objects, or a particular sensory characteristic that strongly resembles a previously encountered, perhaps dimly remembered or implicitly processed scene. Instead of simply noting the resemblance, the brain's pattern-completing circuits fire, triggering a full familiarity signal, which is then consciously experienced as déjà vu. The subsequent rational realization that the scene is indeed new then creates the cognitive dissonance that defines the experience. This perspective underscores that memory is not a discrete collection of individual snapshots, but a vast, interconnected web of associations. Activating one part of this web can spread activation to related parts, including the familiarity tag. When this activation occurs for a novel stimulus, the result is déjà vu. It's a natural consequence of a system designed for rapid recognition and generalization, sometimes at the cost of absolute precision in source attribution. In conclusion of Part 3, we have firmly established that human memory is a complex, active, and reconstructive process, far from the simplistic notion of a flawless recording device. We have explored the different components of memory, distinguishing between working, episodic, and semantic memory, and noted the influence of implicit memory processes, like priming. Critically, we have positioned déjà vu as an anomaly primarily within the episodic memory system, specifically as a type of source monitoring error, where the brain misattributes the origin of a strong familiarity signal. Our extensive tour of common memory errors and illusions, source amnesia, cryptomnesia, the misinformation effect, and the creation of vivid false memories, has aimed to contextualize déjà vu. These examples demonstrate just how easily our memories can be distorted, fabricated, or misattributed, highlighting the inherent fallibility of our cognitive systems. The influence of schemas and the brain's powerful pattern completion abilities further explain how a novel situation can trigger a false sense of familiarity. Déjà vu, therefore, is not a flaw in a poorly designed memory system. Instead, it is a fascinating byproduct of a highly adaptive and incredibly sophisticated cognitive architecture. Our brains are constantly striving for efficiency, coherence, and predictive power. These errors or illusions are often the cost of such efficiency, revealing the intricate processes by which our minds construct a seamless and consistent sense of reality. The fleeting, self-correcting nature of déjà vu in healthy individuals suggests that it is a harmless glimpse into the inner workings of our memory system, a transient moment when the brain's efforts to make sense of the world produce a curious, compelling anomaly. Having dissected the architecture of memory and its inherent fallibility, we now turn our attention, in Part 4, to the very initial stages of information processing: perception and attention. Our memory system can only operate on the information it receives, and as we will see, these initial perceptual and attentional gateways are themselves full of subtle biases, selective filters, and shortcuts that can profoundly influence what ultimately gets encoded and how it contributes to our subjective experience of familiarity and novelty. This deeper dive into perception will further illuminate how these fascinating cognitive glitches, including déjà vu, can arise from the very first moments of encountering a new stimulus. The intricate dance between perception, attention, and memory is a continuous loop, and understanding each component is crucial to unraveling the mystery of déjà vu. The profound complexity of this interplay reminds us that our subjective experience, while feeling so immediate and real, is the result of countless milliseconds of intricate neural computation. We now transition from the intricate architecture of human memory and its inherent susceptibilities to error and reconstruction to an even more fundamental stage of cognitive processing: the gateway of perception and attention. Part 4 of our lecture, titled The Gateway of Perception, Attention, Subliminal Input, and Gestalt, will contend that the fidelity of our memories, and indeed the very nature of our conscious experience, is profoundly shaped by what we perceive and, crucially, what we attend to. The central idea here is that memory can only be as good as the information it receives, and this initial input stage is itself not a perfect objective mirror of reality, but rather a highly selective and interpretive process full of filters, shortcuts, and biases. These early perceptual and attentional mechanisms are fertile ground for the momentary cognitive misattributions that can manifest as déjà vu. Let us begin by considering the sheer volume of sensory information that bombards us at every waking moment. Our eyes register light and color. Our ears pick up an astonishing array of sounds. Our skin registers touch and temperature. Our nose detects countless chemical compounds. And our tongue processes tastes. If our brains were to consciously process every single piece of this incoming data, we would be overwhelmed, paralyzed by an incomprehensible deluge of raw sensory input. This is where attention plays its crucial role. Attention acts as a cognitive filter or a mental spotlight, selectively focusing our processing resources on a small, manageable fraction of the incoming sensory data while largely suppressing or ignoring the rest. It is the mechanism by which we prioritize information, allowing us to selectively engage with relevant stimuli and disengage from irrelevant ones. This selective nature of attention is incredibly adaptive. It allows us to focus on a conversation in a noisy room, to navigate a complex environment, or to concentrate on a specific task without being constantly distracted. However, the very selectivity that makes attention so adaptive also inherently introduces limitations and potential for subtle errors. When our attention is directed towards one aspect of our environment, we often become oblivious to other, even prominent, features. This phenomenon is vividly demonstrated by what is known as inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness occurs when an individual fails to perceive an unexpected stimulus that is in plain sight, simply because their attention is focused elsewhere. The classic demonstration of this is the invisible gorilla experiment by Daniel Simons and Christopher Chabris. Participants are asked to watch a video of people passing basketballs and to count the number of passes made by one team. While participants are intently focused on this counting task, a person in a gorilla suit walks slowly through the middle of the scene, stops, beats their chest, and then walks off. Astonishingly, over half of the participants fail to notice the gorilla, despite its obvious presence in the visual field. Their attention was so narrowly focused on the ball counting task that they simply did not process the unexpected stimulus. A closely related phenomenon is change blindness. Change blindness refers to the failure to notice significant changes in a visual scene, even when those changes are quite substantial and might seem obvious in retrospect. This often occurs when a visual disruption, such as a brief flicker, a saccade, eye movement, or a visual occlusion, like a door momentarily passing in front of a person, accompanies the change. For example, in some experiments, participants might be engaged in a conversation with a person, and during a momentary visual disruption, e.g., a large object passing between them, or the participant briefly turning their head, the person they are talking to is swapped with a different individual. Many participants fail to notice the swap, continuing the conversation as if nothing has changed. Their brains are so focused on maintaining the continuity of the interaction that they do not detect the change in identity. These demonstrations of inattentional and change blindness are critical to understanding déjà vu from a perceptual perspective. They reveal that our conscious perception of the world is far less comprehensive than we often assume. We do not perceive a complete, high-fidelity representation of our environment. Instead, our brains construct a subjective reality based on what we attend to and what is deemed most relevant. This selective processing means that it is entirely possible for us to process elements of a scene or an environment at a low, non-conscious level, even if our attention is directed elsewhere, or if the scene is only briefly available to our direct gaze. This partial, implicit processing sets the stage for one of the most compelling modern psychological theories of déjà vu, the perceptual fluency hypothesis. The perceptual fluency hypothesis, also known as the divided attention theory or the unconscious processing theory, is one of the most widely accepted cognitive explanations for déjà vu in healthy individuals. It directly links the experience of déjà vu to the initial stages of perception and the subsequent processing of that information. The core idea is that déjà vu arises when the brain processes a new environment or situation with an unusual ease or fluency due to some form of prior implicit exposure or partial processing, and then misinterprets this ease as a sign of past familiarity. Let us break down the mechanism of the perceptual fluency hypothesis in detail. It typically involves a two-stage process. The first stage involves initial, incomplete, or subliminal processing of a novel environment or scene. This can happen in several ways. Brief, rapid glance. You might quickly scan a new room or a new street, taking in its general layout and some key features, but not consciously focusing on every detail. Your attention might be divided. Perhaps you are talking on your phone, looking for something else, or simply rushing. Peripheral vision. While consciously focused on one object or person, elements of the surrounding environment might be processed implicitly in your peripheral vision without entering conscious awareness. Subliminal exposure. You might be exposed to the elements of a scene at a very low level of awareness, below the threshold of conscious perception. For example, you might see a quick flash of a specific building type on a blurry photograph in a magazine, or the fleeting image of a street intersection in a video without consciously registering it. Fragmented encoding. Your brain might encode individual components or features of a scene in a piecemeal fashion, without integrating them into a cohesive whole, perhaps due to a momentary cognitive distraction or an interrupted viewing. In all these scenarios, your brain processes some information about the new scene. This initial, often very brief, non-conscious, or partial processing creates a weak, implicit memory trace of the scene's elements. This trace is not a conscious memory that you can explicitly recall. Rather, it is a subtle alteration in your neural pathways that makes subsequent processing of the same information easier. The second stage occurs when you then consciously and fully attend to the exact same scene or environment a moment later. Because your brain has already undergone some preliminary processing of its elements, due to the implicit trace, it now processes the scene with remarkable perceptual fluency. This means that the processing feels smoother, faster, and requires less cognitive effort than truly novel stimuli. Your brain might quickly identify the objects, the spatial relationships, and the overall configuration of the scene with unusual ease. Here is where the misattribution occurs. Your brain registers this enhanced perceptual fluency. It feels easy to process this new scene. However, instead of correctly attributing this ease to the very recent, brief, or implicit exposure, your metacognitive system, the part of your brain that monitors and interprets your own cognitive processes, mistakenly attributes this fluency to a prior long-term explicit memory. In other words, your brain interprets the feeling of ease as a signal of deep, past familiarity. This feels easy to process. Therefore, I must have seen this before, and it is familiar from a distinct prior encounter. This leads to the characteristic sensation of déjà vu, the powerful subjective feeling of having already seen something, even though you know rationally that you haven't. The conflict of signals, which we discussed in Part 1, is then generated. The strong feeling of familiarity, derived from perceptual fluency, clashes with your conscious awareness that this experience is, in fact, novel. This creates the cognitive dissonance and the unsettling, yet intriguing, quality of déjà vu. The brain's internal monitoring system correctly identifies that there's no explicit memory to account for the familiarity, but the strong feeling of familiarity persists, arising from that subconscious processing. Let us consider a concrete example. You are walking down a street in an unfamiliar city, distracted by a conversation on your phone. You briefly glance into an alleyway, taking in a very quick, unconscious snapshot of its brick wall, a garbage can, and a fire escape. This creates a weak, implicit memory trace. A minute later, you end the phone call and consciously decide to explore that same alleyway. As you step in, your brain processes the brick wall, the garbage can, and the fire escape. Because you had that fleeting, implicit exposure moments earlier, your brain processes these familiar elements with remarkable ease, a high degree of perceptual fluency. Your metacognitive system picks up on this fluency and for a fleeting moment interprets it as a sign of having been in this exact alleyway before, triggering déjà vu. But then your conscious logical mind asserts, "No, I've never been here. I'm new to this city." This is the battle of signals. The perceptual fluency hypothesis elegantly explains why déjà vu is so often triggered by visual scenes and why it tends to be fleeting. The implicit trace is typically very weak and transient, only powerful enough to generate that momentary feeling of fluency before the conscious system fully asserts novelty. It also fits well with the concept of source monitoring errors, which we discussed in Part 3. The feeling of familiarity is genuine, but its source, recent implicit processing, is misattributed to a more distant, explicit memory. The brain is attempting to find the most plausible explanation for the unexpected ease of processing and mistakenly concludes that it must be a prior experience. The role of subliminal input further underpins this theory. Subliminal perception refers to the processing of sensory information without conscious awareness. Stimuli presented below the threshold of conscious perception can still influence our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. While direct evidence linking specific subliminal messages to déjà vu is difficult to establish, the concept is crucial. If we are constantly processing information below the level of consciousness, then it is plausible that a new scene or event might trigger a sense of familiarity because some of its components were implicitly processed moments before or even hours before without us being aware of it. These implicit exposures, whether through peripheral vision, rapid glances, or very brief presentations, are sufficient to create the kind of weak memory trace that can enhance perceptual fluency upon later conscious re-exposure. This idea emphasizes that our brains are constantly working in the background, absorbing and processing information that never quite makes it into our conscious awareness, yet can still subtly influence our later experiences and perceptions. Beyond the specific mechanism of perceptual fluency, the principles of Gestalt psychology offer another lens through which to understand how initial perception can contribute to the feeling of déjà vu. Gestalt psychology, a school of thought that emerged in early 20th century Germany, emphasizes that the mind organizes sensory data into meaningful wholes, or gestalts, rather than simply perceiving individual elements. The central tenet of Gestalt psychology is captured by the famous phrase, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." We do not just see individual lines and colors, we perceive a unified face. We do not just hear individual notes, we perceive a melody. The brain actively imposes organization and meaning on incoming sensory information, striving for simplicity, regularity, and coherence. Several Gestalt principles of perceptual organization are relevant here. Proximity. Elements close to each other tend to be perceived as a group. Similarity. Elements that look similar, e.g., in color, shape, size, tend to be grouped together. Closure. Our brains tend to fill in missing parts of a design or image to create a complete whole. We perceive complete shapes even when parts are missing. Continuity. We tend to perceive lines and patterns as continuous, even if they are interrupted. Figure ground. We separate images into a foreground, figure, and a background, ground. How do these principles relate to déjà vu? Imagine encountering a truly novel scene, a unique building, a new room, a particular arrangement of objects. Even if you have never seen this exact scene before, its overall structure, its layout, or the spatial relationships between its components might closely match a generic schema or a previously encountered but forgotten gestalt pattern. For example, a new hotel lobby might have a grand staircase, a central chandelier, and a specific arrangement of seating areas that, while distinct in specific details, broadly matches the overall grand lobby schema or a similar lobby you experienced years ago and have forgotten. According to this view, the brain's strong tendency to perceive holes and complete patterns from incomplete data could contribute to a scene feeling familiar. The brain recognizes the overall gestalt, or the structural similarity between the new scene and a pre-existing, perhaps very generalized or implicitly stored template or schema in our minds. This is not necessarily about specific objects or details, but about the overall configuration or the sense of the space. When the brain processes this new scene, it quickly recognizes the underlying structure as familiar, thanks to its pattern matching capabilities and its drive for gestalt completion. This rapid recognition of the overall pattern then triggers the feeling of familiarity, even though the specific details are novel. Consider a person who has visited many similar-looking university lecture halls in their life. Each new lecture hall they enter might have a similar layout: rows of seats, a projector screen, a lectern, a door in the back. While each hall is objectively unique, their overall gestalt is very similar. Upon entering a new lecture hall for the first time, the brain might immediately recognize the familiar pattern of a lecture hall. This recognition of the overall form or arrangement could be so strong that it mistakenly activates a broader familiarity signal, causing the person to experience déjà vu as if they have been in this specific lecture hall before, when in fact they are merely recognizing the general schema or configuration. The brain is very good at identifying similarities and using them for rapid categorization. Déjà vu in this context is a momentary overgeneralization of this pattern matching ability. This gestalt-influenced perspective complements the perceptual fluency hypothesis. The prior implicit exposure or the rapid partial processing, perceptual fluency, could be specifically about recognizing the overall structure or gestalt of a scene. The ease of processing could then be tied to the brain's ability to quickly match the new visual input to an existing general pattern or schema, rather than needing to process it as a completely novel configuration of elements. The brain completes the pattern and then misattributes the ease of this completion to a specific past memory. Furthermore, some theories integrate the idea of attentional lapses with the perceptual fluency and gestalt approaches. An attentional lapse, perhaps a momentary distraction or a shift in focus, could cause an initial, incomplete processing of a scene's gist or overall configuration. When attention returns and the full scene is consciously perceived, the brain might struggle to integrate this new, detailed input with the weakly encoded, holistic gist from moments before. The feeling of déjà vu arises from this mismatch. The brain senses a familiarity with the overall gist from the brief, implicit processing, but struggles to reconcile it with the novelty of the detailed, consciously perceived scene. The gist is familiar, but the specific details are not, leading to the peculiar internal conflict. It is crucial to recognize that these perceptual and attentional explanations do not necessarily exclude the neurological theories discussed in Part 2. Instead, they provide the cognitive mechanisms that could trigger the neural events in the temporal lobe. For instance, the misattribution of perceptual fluency could be the cognitive process that leads to a temporary desynchronization or misfiring within the hippocampus and parahippocampal gyrus. The two levels of explanation, cognitive and neurological, are complementary, describing different facets of the same complex phenomenon. The perceptual fluency hypothesis describes how the input to the memory system might be compromised in a way that leads to a feeling of familiarity, while the neurological theories describe where in the brain this feeling is generated and what neural activity patterns are involved. The strength of the perceptual fluency hypothesis lies in its ability to explain several common characteristics of déjà vu, its fleeting nature. The initial implicit trace is typically weak and quickly overwritten by conscious processing. The feeling of fluency is momentary. Its prevalence in youth. Younger brains are often more receptive to implicit learning and rapid processing, and their attentional systems might be more prone to momentary shifts or divided attention, making them more susceptible to these misattributions. Its common triggers. Déjà vu is often triggered by complex, visually rich scenes, e.g., new rooms, landscapes, cities, rather than simple, isolated objects. This is consistent with the idea that the brain is processing spatial layouts, overall configurations, or a multitude of elements that contribute to the gist of a scene. The feeling of knowing without specific recall. The perceptual fluency explanation perfectly captures this. You feel like you know the scene because it's easy to process, but you can't recall when or how you know it, because the source of the fluency was an implicit, non-conscious exposure. The concept of contextual familiarity further elaborates on this. It posits that a new scene might not be familiar in its specific details, but its context or arrangement of elements might resemble a previous experience. For instance, seeing a coffee shop with a particular arrangement of tables and chairs, a certain lighting, and a specific type of background music might evoke a strong sense of familiarity because this combination of contextual features matches a pattern you've implicitly processed before, even if the specific coffee shop itself is new. Your brain is a powerful context matcher, and when a new context aligns with a loosely stored or implicitly processed template, it can generate that powerful, already seen feeling. This discussion also highlights the profound impact of environmental cues on our subjective experience. The actual visual or auditory input from the world directly feeds into our brain's processing machinery. Even subtle features of a new environment, if they resonate with existing, even non-conscious cognitive representations, can trigger complex internal states. The way light hits a wall, the specific shade of a color, the sound of a distant murmur, any of these elements, or their combination, could potentially contribute to a subliminal processing event that predisposes the brain to later experience déjà vu. Ultimately, the perceptual and attentional theories suggest that déjà vu is not a failure of memory storage, but rather a momentary error in memory retrieval and source monitoring that originates in the very first moments of perception. It is a misinterpretation of a feeling of ease or familiarity that arises from the brain's rapid, efficient, and sometimes implicitly driven processing of novel stimuli. By understanding the brain's filtering mechanisms, its tendency to process information outside of conscious awareness, and its drive to organize sensory data into meaningful wholes, we can begin to see déjà vu as a predictable, albeit fascinating consequence of how our minds construct their subjective reality. It is a testament to the fact that what we consciously perceive is merely the tip of the iceberg of neural activity occurring within our brains. The vast majority of sensory processing, pattern matching, and preliminary analysis happens below the threshold of our awareness, yet profoundly influences our conscious experience, occasionally giving rise to these intriguing cognitive illusions. This intricate dance between what we see, what we attend to, and what we implicitly process forms the bedrock for these mysterious feelings of familiarity in novel situations. This concludes part 4 of our lecture, where we have explored the critical role of perception and attention as gateways to our cognitive experience. We have delved into how the brain's selective filters, exemplified by phenomena like inattentional and change blindness, set the stage for implicit processing. We have examined the perceptual fluency hypothesis in detail, understanding how the misattribution of processing ease can lead to déjà vu. Finally, we have considered the insights from Gestalt psychology, demonstrating how the brain's tendency to perceive wholes and complete patterns can contribute to a sense of familiarity with novel configurations. We have now covered the definitions, the neurological underpinnings, the architecture of memory, and the role of perception. This comprehensive foundation brings us to the final and perhaps most reflective part of our lecture. In part 5, we will synthesize these understandings to contemplate what déjà vu ultimately tells us about the nature of consciousness itself, our metacognitive processes, and the continuous construction of the self, aiming to provide a sense of closure and intellectual peace as we consider the profound implications of these fleeting mental events. The journey through the complexities of our mind nears its contemplative conclusion. We have now journeyed through the definitional landscape of déjà vu, peered into its neurological correlates within the temporal lobes, dissected the intricate and fallible architecture of human memory, and explored how the gateways of perception and attention can shape our experience of novelty and familiarity. Each part has peeled back a layer of this fascinating phenomenon, moving from the subjective what to the biological where and the cognitive how. In this final and most abstract part of our lecture, part 5, the conscious experience, metacognition, the self, and the nature of subjectivity, we will synthesize these understandings. We will move beyond specific mechanisms and ask broader questions. What does déjà vu ultimately tell us about consciousness itself, about how our brains monitor their own operations, and about the continuous construction of our sense of self? This concluding reflection aims to provide a deeper, more holistic understanding, offering intellectual peace as we consider the profound implications of these fleeting mental events for our grasp of reality. At the heart of the déjà vu experience is a subjective feeling, a qualia of already seen. Why does the brain produce these specific feelings? The profound sense of familiarity, the unsettling awareness of its misplacement, the distinct quality of newness or strangeness. These are questions that delve into the very nature of consciousness itself. Consciousness is the state of being aware of one's own existence and surroundings, the subjective experience of the world and our place in it. It encompasses perception, thoughts, emotions, and memories. Déjà vu is a moment when the seamless tapestry of consciousness seems to fray, offering a momentary glimpse behind the curtain of its construction. It is a striking example of how our subjective reality can diverge, however briefly, from objective reality. The feeling is real, yet its basis in objective fact is absent. This suggests that consciousness is not merely a passive reception of sensory input, but an active, interpretive process, constantly making sense of internal and external signals. A key concept for understanding déjà vu from this higher-level perspective is metacognition, often described as cognition about cognition, or thinking about thinking. Metacognition refers to our ability to monitor, regulate, and reflect upon our own cognitive processes. It is the awareness of our own knowledge, memory, comprehension, and learning strategies. For example, knowing that you need to study more for a test, or realizing you have forgotten someone's name, or feeling confident that you know the answer to a question even before you retrieve it, are all metacognitive experiences. In the context of déjà vu, the phenomenon can be precisely framed as a metacognitive event, where the brain is actively interpreting its own cognitive processes, specifically those related to familiarity and novelty. The core of déjà vu, as we have emphasized, is the conflict of signals, a strong implicit feeling of familiarity generated by one part of the brain, perhaps due to perceptual fluency or a temporal lobe anomaly, clashes with the explicit conscious knowledge that the current situation is novel. Our metacognitive system is responsible for registering this conflict. It's the thinking about thinking that allows us to simultaneously feel, I know this, and I know I do not know this. The feeling of strangeness that often accompanies déjà vu arises directly from this metacognitive conflict. It is the brain's attempt to reconcile two contradictory pieces of information about its own state of knowledge. If there were no explicit awareness of novelty, the experience would simply be one of genuine recognition. If there were no feeling of familiarity, it would just be a new experience. The weirdness of déjà vu is precisely because our metacognitive system flags this internal inconsistency. It is the brain saying, wait a minute, something doesn't add up here. My familiarity detector is firing, but my novelty detector is also firing. What's going on? This internal alarm is the metacognitive system trying to make sense of the conflicting signals it's receiving from its own memory and perceptual systems. The resolution, which is often very rapid, is the brain concluding that the feeling of familiarity is misplaced, leading to the fleeting nature of the experience. This metacognitive view places déjà vu squarely within the realm of normal cognitive functioning. It suggests that déjà vu is not a malfunction in the primary cognitive systems, like memory encoding or retrieval themselves, but rather an occasional misinterpretation by the monitoring system. It is a glitch in the readout of our cognitive state, rather than a fundamental flaw in the cognitive state itself. The brain's attempt to understand its own internal signals, to make sense of why it feels familiar with something objectively new, is what creates the subjective experience. Beyond individual experiences and cognitive processes, déjà vu offers intriguing insights into the narrative self. The concept of the narrative self, a cornerstone of many psychological and philosophical theories of identity, posits that our sense of who we are is not a static entity, but a continuously constructed story. We build our identity, our self, through a coherent narrative that integrates our past experiences, episodic memories, our present perceptions, and our future aspirations. This narrative provides meaning, continuity, and a stable sense of personal history. It is how we make sense of our lives, linking moments together into a cohesive storyline. Our episodic memories are the raw material for this narrative, providing the specific plot points and details. Experiential anomalies like déjà vu and jamais vu can be seen as momentary disruptions to this narrative. They are brief instances where the continuity of our self-story is temporarily fractured. When déjà vu occurs, the brain experiences a profound sense of re-experiencing something, but cannot place it logically within the established narrative of our past. It's a memory fragment without a proper timestamp or context within our personal history. This creates a brief, unsettling discontinuity in our self-narrative. For a fleeting moment, the author behind the story, the fallible cognitive machinery that constructs our reality, becomes apparent. we are reminded that our seamless, continuous sense of self is not an immutable given, but a carefully constructed illusion maintained by the brain. Similarly, jamais vu, where something familiar suddenly feels foreign, can be even more disruptive to the narrative self. If your own hand, your home, or your spouse suddenly feels alien, it challenges the fundamental familiarity that forms the bedrock of your personal world. These are moments where the brain's internal models of familiarity and identity briefly break down, revealing the underlying cognitive processes that constantly work to maintain our coherent sense of self. They are powerful reminders that our personal narrative is not a fixed recording, but a dynamic, active construction susceptible to momentary glitches and reconfigurations. They expose the fragility and constructed nature of our subjective reality, forcing us to confront the fact that our immediate, unquestioned sense of being is a continuous achievement of complex neural processes. The very fact that déjà vu is typically benign and self-correcting in healthy individuals is also profoundly telling. It suggests that our brain has a sophisticated error detection and correction system. When the metacognitive system detects the conflict between the familiarity signal and the novelty signal, it quickly works to resolve it. The feeling of weirdness or strangeness is part of this resolution process, signaling that an internal inconsistency needs attention. Most often, the rational, conscious awareness of novelty prevails, and the fleeting sense of false familiarity dissipates, leaving behind only an intriguing memory of an odd sensation. This self-correction mechanism underscores the brain's remarkable adaptability and its continuous striving for coherence and accuracy in its representation of the world. It's a momentary internal debate, swiftly concluded. What broader implications does déjà vu hold for our understanding of consciousness, reality, and the human mind? First, déjà vu reinforces the idea that consciousness is an interpretive construct. We don't passively absorb reality. Our brains actively interpret and make sense of incoming sensory data. This interpretation is influenced by our past experiences, our expectations, our attention, and the efficiency of our internal cognitive processes. Déjà vu is a compelling example of a moment when this interpretive process produces a subjective experience that does not align with objective reality. It serves as a stark, albeit transient, reminder that our perception of reality is precisely that, a perception, a creation of our own minds. The internal feeling is real, but its external correlate is not. This doesn't mean reality isn't real, but rather that our experience of it is mediated and constructed. Second, déjà vu suggests that the brain is a self-monitoring organ. The metacognitive processes involved in detecting the conflict that defines déjà vu illustrate that the brain is not just performing cognitive tasks, but it is also simultaneously monitoring its own performance on those tasks. It's like having an internal quality control system that flags inconsistencies. This self-monitoring is essential for learning, error correction, and maintaining a coherent sense of self and world. Déjà vu is simply one visible manifestation of this ongoing internal monitoring process. It's a healthy brain alerting itself to a momentary internal anomaly. Third, déjà vu highlights the multi-layered nature of memory. It shows us that memories are not monolithic. There are different types of memory, explicit versus implicit, and different aspects of memory, content versus source, familiarity versus specific recall, can be processed and affected independently. Déjà vu often involves a strong feeling of familiarity, a basic, perhaps implicit, memory signal, that is decoupled from explicit episodic recall and accurate source attribution. This further emphasizes that memory is a complex, distributed system rather than a single, unified store. Fourth, déjà vu underscores the fragility and robustness of our cognitive systems. While it can be unsettling, the fact that déjà vu is so common and yet almost universally benign in healthy individuals speaks to the remarkable resilience of the human brain. Occasional glitches are to be expected in such an incredibly complex and dynamic system. The brain's ability to self-correct and quickly move past these anomalies demonstrates its inherent robustness and adaptability. Rather than being a sign of something broken, déjà vu can be seen as a sign of a brain that is functioning, albeit with a temporary fascinating quirk. It is a minor anomaly that reveals the underlying complexity of highly efficient and adaptive processes. Finally, and perhaps most profoundly, déjà vu provides a humble reminder of the mystery inherent in consciousness. Despite significant advancements in neuroscience and psychology, the hard problem of consciousness, how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience, remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries. Déjà vu, with its perplexing blend of objective novelty and subjective familiarity, touches upon this mystery directly. It asks us to consider how such a specific and paradoxical feeling can arise from the electrochemical activity of neurons. While we can describe the mechanisms, the why of the feeling itself continues to inspire philosophical and scientific inquiry. It is a vivid testament to the fact that our inner world, our subjective experience, is incredibly rich, nuanced, and occasionally, surprisingly perplexing. This discussion brings us to a sense of intellectual peace regarding déjà vu. Instead of being a sign of something paranormal or a serious malfunction, déjà vu can be seen as a healthy and fascinating indicator of a highly complex and self-monitoring brain. It is a harmless glimpse behind the curtain of consciousness, revealing the intricate and sometimes imperfect processes that work together to create our seamless subjective world. It is a fleeting moment of wonder, reminding us of the extraordinary feat our brains perform every second, constructing the coherent reality we inhabit. By understanding déjà vu, we gain a deeper appreciation for the nuanced interplay of memory, perception, attention, and metacognition that forms the very fabric of our subjective experience. It is a testament to the incredible and sometimes surprising ways in which our minds work to make sense of the world around and within us. In conclusion, our journey through the mystery of déjà vu explained and more has spanned a vast landscape of psychological and neurological inquiry. We began by carefully defining déjà vu and its family of related phenomena, establishing a common language and distinguishing it from other mental states. We then delved into the brain's temporal lobes, identifying the hippocampus, parahippocampal gyrus, and amygdala as key neural players, and explored theories of desynchronization and neural delay, supported by compelling evidence from temporal lobe epilepsy. Our exploration of memory architecture revealed its reconstructive nature and susceptibility to errors like source amnesia, cryptomnesia, and false memories, positioning déjà vu as a momentary memory illusion. We then turned to the gateways of perception and attention, examining how divided attention, subliminal input, and Gestalt principles can lead to the perceptual fluency that often underpins déjà vu. Finally, in this current section, we elevated our discussion to the level of conscious experience, metacognition, and the narrative self, arguing that déjà vu is a powerful, albeit fleeting, metacognitive event that highlights the brain's self-monitoring capabilities and the constructed nature of our subjective reality. From its mysterious origins in the late 1900s to modern neuroscientific explanations, Déjà vu has transitioned from a perplexing anomaly to a compelling window into the sophisticated, dynamic, and occasionally surprising workings of the human mind. It is a common, benign, and fascinating cognitive phenomenon that, far from being a flaw, showcases the brain's remarkable capacity for complex information processing, pattern recognition, and self-correction. It reminds us that our subjective world is a continuous act of creation, a masterpiece of neural computation, occasionally punctuated by these intriguing and harmless cognitive illusions. As we conclude this extensive lecture, may these insights into the workings of your own mind provide a calming sense of understanding. Rest assured that the peculiarities of your subjective experience are often simply reflections of your brain's incredible complexity, constantly working to make sense of the world, even when it occasionally produces a fascinating glitch. Lie back, let the information settle, and allow your mind to drift peacefully into a restful state, knowing that even in sleep, your brain continues its remarkable work. Thank you for joining me on this exploration. Good night.